Hello and welcome to the EMJ GOLD podcast, brought to you by EMJ, your number one open access destination for HCPs and pharma globally. Great to be back in the studio with you, Jade.
Yes.
It's been a little while since we've been hosting together, but now we are over halfway through the season. It's lovely to be back with a slightly different podcast episode today.
Yes, absolutely. To mark this special occasion, being halfway through the season, we actually have a special guest host for today's interview. That is the host of the EMJ podcast, Dr Jonathan Sackier. He joined me at Reuters Events Pharma in Barcelona earlier this year for a lovely sunny stint around the conference centre. But Isabel, who is he going to be speaking to today?
Well, for the avid fans among you, you may have seen the cashless interview we published with today's guest, who is Stefan Woxström, the Senior Vice President for Europe and Canada at AstraZeneca.
Yes. Today you'll get to hear Stefan's full interview with us. We just could not fit all of his insights into just one written interview, so you'll get to hear that in full with us today. It's a great one, so I really hope you enjoy listening.
Yes, but before we get into it, let me tell you a bit about Stefan, if you don't know a lot about him already. So at AstraZeneca, he leads the commercial operations in over 30 countries. He's really driven by a passion for improving patients' lives. He's a firm believer in the power of partnership and how that can solve various healthcare challenges. You'll hear a lot about that in the interview. And he's also incredibly passionate about tackling the burden of chronic disease and how we can make healthcare systems ready for the future, tackle the current challenges and prepare for what may be lying ahead.
Absolutely, the future's coming in fast.
It is.
He's worked at AstraZeneca for more than 28 years now. He actually joined before the merging of AstraZeneca, so you can imagine how much he'll have to share with us about how the industry has actually changed during this time. But I do think that's enough from us for now. Let's tune into Stefan and Jonathan.
Yep, we hope you enjoy.
So we're here at Reuters with Stefan Woxström from AstraZeneca. Thanks for joining us, Stefan.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
And how's it going for you so far?
It's going very well. Yes, absolutely. I mean, what I mean with that is we got a lot of new medicines that we're now introducing in many therapeutic areas. We're investing a lot in healthcare systems, in research and development. We think it's very much needed to go to the next generation also on science, which means going into gene therapy, cell therapy to really transform. So we think that's very important. We invest a lot in these areas. Lately in Europe, I'm heading up Europe and Canada, so which means we just had big investments in France in gene therapy, cell therapy, rare disease. Selectis is a company we just acquired a part of.
And tell us a little bit about that, what they do.
They do research in gene therapy and cell therapy, so we bought part of that company, so we can access quite a few molecules that they have in their pipelines, which we think actually can go into both cancer and perhaps also rare disease to transform.
I'm actually fascinated with the whole rare disease area. I mean, I think if you look at the numbers, something like 2% of the world have a rare disease, and there are 7,000 rare diseases. So it's actually a large number of people, but they're so-called rare diseases. But they teach us a lot about the mechanism of illness, and it's not just about treating, let's say, an enzyme deficiency, Gaucher's or Fabry's or something like that. They teach us about the mechanism of molecular biology, which, when I went to medical school, there was none of this stuff. In my professional lifetime, and yours as well, I'm guessing, this has all changed dramatically.
Yes.
That's changed the way pharma has to behave, right? Because it used to be all about small molecules.
Absolutely. It is, and we need more attention to this area. I mean, you talked about around 7,000 diseases, but it's just a small fraction that we have a solution to right now. So there's so much more to do. And actually, there needs to be better incentives for companies to invest in rare disease. We need more rare disease research, not less. So it's a lot to do there.
Traditionally, Stefan, the way it's worked, I mean, again, in my professional lifetime, it's changed. Pharma used to do R&D from the test tube all the way through to marketing. Then it moved more to external R, and then pharma gets involved in the D. With this change to molecular biology, gene therapy, complex treatments for rare diseases, some of which, again, we didn't even know about many years ago. It requires a different skill set, but it also requires different capital. And I know, having started companies, that raising money at the moment is hard.
Yeah.
This is a very tough environment to start something new. And we're not talking about developing a new tool for surgery. Molecular biology is expensive science. How do we do that?
Yeah, you're raising a very important topic, and it's actually very, very present, that topic, in EU and the discussions around incentives for research.
For
Yes,
research, right.
so I'll come on to that in a minute. But yeah, well, AstraZeneca, for example, we're collaborating across the world with, science centers. We're acquiring companies where we just recently also did in Canada, looking at radio conjugates. So Fusion is the company name.
Yeah,
we have
Fusion,
Gracell we have also in China, as I said, Selectis in
Yeah.
France, Amulet in France. So we're doing a lot of investments in companies who have great innovation, and we can actually accelerate that science and make sure it becomes available to patients very quickly. So we do some internally, of course, but we work also externally with companies to find the best innovation for patients. One thing that's really important is the incentives. And one incentive is regulatory data protection. As you know, it's a hot topic at the moment.
That's what makes my teeth
But
itch.
yes, but the thing is, I'm not sure sometimes policymakers understand what it's all about. Because they think it's about the history, the past 20 years that they want to correct. They don't understand that they're shaping something that's going to set the whole framework for the next 25 years, where there is new science. Can you have a patent for cell therapy that you had for small molecules, for hypertension treatment, before?
Yeah.
No, this is what they say when you speak to IP specialists.
Yes.
So they say you need to be relying on the regulatory data protection. The fact that competitors or generic companies cannot access your clinical data and use that in a file. And if they reduce that time significantly, where they want to go from 8 to 6 years was the proposal, right?
Yes,
So,
yeah.
that means it takes 2 years to get reimbursement, so those 6 years, 2 are gone already, so you got 4 years of protection, while in the US, biologic has 12 years.
So Stefan, I'm smiling because I won't mention names to protect the deceased, but a number of years ago, when I was living in the United States, there was a proposal to reduce the patent life. I took a group of friends of mine to the Senate and the Congress, not as a lobbyist, but as a concerned physician, and I sat with a very senior American senator who said to me, pharmaceuticals are too expensive. My constituents have to go over to Mexico to buy their drugs. If we reduce the patent life, the cost will come down because generics can come in sooner. And I said, but Senator, if you reduce the patent life, there's no economic incentive for the company to invest a fortune to bring a drug to market. There'll never be a generic because there'll never be a drug. And he didn't understand it. So I'd like to unpack what you said. Let's deal first of all with intellectual property. How do we create IP estates that protect those people who put capital at risk to develop life-saving therapies? Question number one. Then let's go through the others.
Yes. We need to see that this is about protecting innovation. It's not a privilege. It's about protecting innovation that could feed new innovation in the future. So we need to understand that to start with. And if you take, for example, the new therapies, you can't, or it's going to be very hard to get an long IP protection for cell therapy, because you take cells from a body and you work on that cell in a lab and then you bring that back. So if you can't have a long IP protection, the only protection then comes down to the regulatory data protection, which wasn't the problem in the past, because in the past you could have the IP protection that was very long on small molecules for treating, for example, anti-hypertension treatment. So now when you rely on that one, that regulatory data protection timeline is going to be critical. I mean, where you go and invest as an investor is going to be in countries where you need to set up this lab to work on cells individually for patients. That's cell therapy, right? This is where you want to do the investments. Do you want to do them in a country where there is short protection, small incentive, or long protection, large? Yeah. So we see already today, when we actually in the European Parliament, we gather different stakeholders from patient organizations, it was from IP, so legal, and we had investors there, and they were actually talking to politicians, so they really would, so they can understand what they're doing already today. They say, okay, you're going to invest in Europe. Well, I'm not sure I want to be part of that. I want to be part of you if you invest in the US. And we also see US innovations are coming quickly to market. The scale up goes fast. So Europe is actually might be lagging behind. I mean, some statistics that I was studying was investments in research and development in Europe over the last 25 years has gone down dramatically.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at, it's around 25% decline. You also see that we used to have 50% of all new medicines coming from Europe. It's down to 20.
Yeah.
Clinical
same in medtech.
Exactly,
So,
right?
yeah.
So if you also see clinical trials, which also shows a little bit where the center of science is going, where we got half of US, we got 1/3 of China. So we need to, make Europe more attractive. And I don't think shortening the regulatory data protection is going to help for the next 30 years. So this is critical that we get this right. I think, the politicians have started to understand that. And last week there was a voting in the parliament on this one. So they didn't go all the way from 8 to 6 years. They went from 8 to 7.5.
Yeah.
So it's at least it's
a
a
nod.
sign, that we understand, but we're not willing to stretch ourselves. But now there's going to be negotiations in the council, so hopefully they will get it right and understand if you're going to compete and make Europe more attractive for new investments. We need to also show that we're serious about this and we have good incentives in place.
So there are things that I can say that I wouldn't expect you to say. There's an expression, when I grow old, I shall wear purple, which basically means at a certain point in your life you just say, the heck with it. Political expedience, in my view, has no role in healthcare. The stakes are too high. We're talking about our responsibilities as healthcare professionals to cater to lives that we know that we can improve and save. And we have people whose political futures, instead of someone saying, it's not fit for purpose. The system that was developed in 1948, 75 years ago, is not fit for the healthcare requirements of a population of 68 million people, a diverse population. We shouldn't be having political discussions, we should be having societal discussions. And I don't expect you, I don't want to put you on the spot to talk about that, because I know you have to work with these, with governments. I think it's a huge problem, and what I'd like you now to answer is, how does the pharmaceutical industry, and frankly my profession, do a better job of explaining to regulators, to those who control IP, those who control reimbursement, what our technologies actually do? Because I think we do a very poor job, actually. I think if you ask the average man on the street, what is cell therapy? What is molecular biology? I don't think, what's the difference between a small and a large molecule? How can we do a better job educating people?
Yeah, I think we could do a better job on that one. We need to demonstrate what we're good at and what we can do. I do think, though, that the pandemic was a good moment for pharma industry to take that opportunity to show what we can do, and we did. Look how, what happened. I mean, we in very short time developed vaccines, several vaccines that could be spread around the world. I mean, just looking at AstraZeneca, we produced 3 billion doses in 1 year. And we actually distributed 2/3 went to low to middle income countries, which I think was very good. Without all companies coming together and collaborate with governments in a crisis situation, we will never be able to be where we are today.
So it shows it can be.
Yes, absolutely. But we need to continue on this run now, right, and feed that. I mean, one thing, we need to lead by example. So one thing that we did in AstraZeneca, we saw that, first of all, how healthcare systems are, of course, suffering during the pandemic. But the question is, how can we make healthcare systems more sustainable and resilient? So we said we need to do something. We can't just sit and watch. So we took contact with World Economic Forum, London School of Economics, and we said we need to assess healthcare systems. We need to show what are they good at, what can they improve, and we need to put it very visibly in front of them. I mean, I think everyone, health ministers, prime ministers, are going to World Economic Forum. They're there. It's a good platform. London School of Economics, they provide a good methodology, trusted academic center who can assess. So we use that, and we also have other partners, so WHO foundations and a few other companies are also in there as well, non-pharma. So we now have been assessing 30 countries across the world, 14, 15, I think, in Europe now, and actually produces a report, quite, a comprehensive report that put on the Minister of Health table and the Prime Minister's table that can compare also with other countries, what they're good at, what they can do better, good examples, good best practice. So I think that could serve as a platform for new reforms that they can take. So I think, yes, that's a good example of how we can work with policymakers to set the right frameworks in the countries so healthcare can be better. How it is, chronic disease. I mean, chronic disease is growing so fast right now because of aging population, growing populations. You got the climate change with pollution, with temperature rise and all that, which is causing a lot more chronic disease as well. So they're really under pressure. 80% of the healthcare budgets are going to treat, at the moment, to treat chronic diseases.
Yes.
3% is going to preventive care.
Yes. Yeah.
So there's something here that needs to be done, and I think the frameworks that the politicians are setting, that they can understand, at least give the people working in healthcare the right framework to work within, so this can be better. We need to shift from sick care to healthcare and make 100% that move.
100% agree. And also, I mean, there are so many nuggets. I think I could talk to you for hours about this. I truly would love to see a utopian circumstance where there is a better, more robust dialogue. People like you, people from my profession, people from government, addressing issues. I'll pick one. You mentioned the pandemic, and I was living in America just prior to that. And in America, vaccine hesitancy, as it's politely called, killed people. And it was driven by ignorance and fear, and the internet works as an echo chamber where negative sentiment is fed back to people. And it struck me that from a sociological perspective, Americans don't do well being told what to do. They don't. I lived there for half my life. They do well when things are offered to them. They'll react to that. I thought it was poorly handled by our profession. And I think if we as a group could do more to communicate how we can improve healthcare systems. I mean, look at Europe. Switzerland, I believe, has just elected to align with FDA from a regulatory perspective. Did I get that right?
Yeah, probably right, yes.
Yeah, and I'm hearing whispers that the UK will do the same. We've had this in my world, in the medical device world. They've gone from a medical device directive to a medical device regulation that makes it almost impossible to bring a medical device to market in Europe. We need more unification. We need more sense. We need the people making the regulations to understand the implications of the regulations. So what are your thoughts? You manage Europe and Canada, and I've worked with Health Canada and found them delightful, very straightforward. What's your perspective on the different regulatory environments?
Yeah, I mean the regulatory environments. I mean Europe made a big step. I think if you look back, and when they have the mutual recognition, it goes much faster. It's more reliable. I think, and it's actually more predictable in timelines and when you can get access to the market and get your authorization. I think that one was great, was very good. We're looking at Canada. Canada is a system where I think the regulatory system is very robust and good. And timelines are pretty much aligned with the rest of the world. I think one thing they're doing good, they're collaborating with the FDA in the so-called Orbis collaboration, which is basically to accelerate critical medicines that we're focusing on oncology specifically. That actually it is making sure that you can actually, from a regulatory perspective, introduce medicines much quicker. But the problem they have in Canada is the price listing and all that takes so long time in Canada that actually it's a bit of a waste to do Orbis because they delay it later on so much anyway. So actually we're talking to them right now, and hopefully, they are at least considering some provinces to look at, can we also shorten the listings so they can be available from a price perspective quicker, at least those products that go through Orbis. So you also you push timelines all the way until it comes to patients. So
that raises a very interesting point, Stefan. The way that we looked at data back when I was at medical school, you may know the classic paper that looks at the absence of level 1 evidence that parachutes actually prevent injury in a gravity-induced fall. There are no randomized control trials showing that parachutes actually work, so we shouldn't use parachutes, right? Of course, it's an ironic article. Nowadays, with the ability to do clever statistics, registries, especially in countries like Europe, do we have to think about how we change the way that drugs go through the development, the phase 3 process, and then get into the market and can get reimbursed faster so that development can accelerate?
Absolutely, I think so. We've been doing real-world evidence for quite some time, and we're starting to get used to register data, whether it's retrospective or if it's prospective, randomized registered trials that it's also being done. I think we're taking some steps forward. I think in some countries it's used for reimbursement purposes, but not so much for regulatory purposes.
Yes.
But what we now start to see is dynamic databases where you build an avatar. So every person in the country becomes an avatar. So you can't identify the person, but you can fill that avatar with health data, which means you can then, do clinical trials, like if it was, and it represents the whole population.
Right.
So it's a different way of doing it, and I think that could be a solution going forward, where even the regulatory framework can trust and rely on for approving new medicines to be effective and safe. So I think we're moving in that direction. So
the Americans have this breakthrough designation, right? So,
yes.
Where if you get breakthrough designation, if you have orphan drug designation, you get enhanced reimbursement. It's bringing the whole process together, right? The intellectual property, regulatory framework, clinical trials, and reimbursement. With the whole, where else in the world is doing that kind of thing?
Well, there is also a process for it in Europe for accelerated, at least conditional approvals you could get. I recently spent 5 years in Japan. They also have a breakthrough recognition. It's actually one is called Sakigake. Sakigake. This is if you're first in the world with a new innovation in Japan, you can get Sakigake. You get very fast regulatory approval. And also the reimbursement are also coming very fast anyway in Japan, but it goes within just a couple of months.
I'll add it to my list of
yes,
Japanese phrases.
Yes, you need to. But that really means you come quick to market, and these innovations coming to patients extremely fast. So I think the Japanese system is very reliable in terms of timelines when it comes to both regulatory approval and reimbursement. Normally, reimbursement in Japan takes 2 months.
2 months?
2 months. It takes 2 months for every medicine that you introduce. In the worst case, it could take 3 months, but it's normally 2 months.
My goodness, I would
Yes.
imagine companies are falling over themselves
Yes.
to do business.
I mean, and they're very quick with updating guidelines, so innovations comes to patients very quickly.
So I want to move on a little bit. Health disparities. We've talked, you talked about the work that AstraZeneca did during the pandemic, and I think we saw the best. I think we saw the best of humanity during COVID, the way that many people behaved. But it calls out health disparities around the world, not just for chronic diseases, and you talk about access to care, which might mean shortage of doctors, shortage of money, geographic barriers, and these disparities persist. And I've been privileged to work around the world and to see that marginalised people are compromised. How can we future-proof healthcare systems to prioritise health equity and health equality to ensure that as many as possible can access this? And what role can companies like Astra play?
Yeah.
It's a big question.
Yeah, I mean, health equity is very important, and it's becoming very important within AstraZeneca as well. We actually formed a unit specifically working on this topic, because if you take a step back and say, yes, we have a lot of innovation coming, but how do we make sure those innovative medicines are coming to all patients that needs it? I mean, regardless of your DNA, your race, your background, where you live, your postcode. A lot of these things matters, right, when it comes. So this is becoming very important, and we actually have a lot of initiatives. It's not about also bringing medicines; it's also taking initiatives to also make sure people are being identified and diagnosed, regardless of who they are or where they live. And that's very important. So it's not only medicines being, equally or equitably distributed. It needs to also to be diagnosis of patients, and that's becoming very important.
You also talked about wellness, and there's the Blue Zone work about places in the world where lifestyle, diet impact health outcomes, and
yes.
I think we need to do a better job.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we need to direct our initiatives to those areas where I think need it the most. And we've been doing that specifically in the UK, for example. We started with one of the areas with the worst asthma outcomes in the UK, which was Hull. And we started an initiative over there with the lung clinic and Professor Crooks, and they did an amazing job with a new program that actually are addressing specifically asthma outcomes, educations to patients, to healthcare professionals, but also looking at referral pathways and all that. So if you get all these things right, and patients can get access to healthcare, being identified, the right diagnosis, get the right treatment, we see that outcomes are coming. So we see now that Hull is having one of the best health outcomes when it comes to treatment of respiratory disease.
I think there's a common thread here, and I think back to something the Australians did many, many years ago, the when there was awareness that sunlight caused skin cancer, they introduced a program to reduce sun exposure, slip, slap, stop, slide, put on shirts, sun cream and all the rest of it. And that was a collaboration between professionals, the healthcare industry. And our industry doesn't get the best press. Over all the years I've been involved in medicine, I've had marvellous interactions with folks in your industry. How can we do a better job letting people know? Yes, of course there are bad actors. There are bad actors in every profession. But how can we do a better job so that the general public understand, what we're up to?
Awareness is, of course, very important. It's one thing that we're working a lot with. Awareness of, to act early. I mean, if you have chronic kidney disease, for example, it's a very simple test you can do yourself, and you can get the signal that I have to go see a doctor. Those tests, I think, are very important, and things like that to make people aware, and also go to the healthcare and ask to be examined. So there's a lot we could do, of course, when it comes to awareness of people, but it's also awareness in the healthcare on new treatments and taking on that. But I think we cannot just bring a lot of more patients into healthcare. We need to make sure the healthcare can also receive those patients and have access for those patients. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in parallel, and working with healthcare systems to make sure they can bring access to patients. So having aware patients, but they can't get the right necessary help from the healthcare is not good either. So we need to work in parallel. Just one thing, when we're working with heart failure, and heart failure is, there's a lot of patients living with heart failure. There's like 15 million in Europe as a whole. So how can we make sure they can quickly get the diagnosis, because it's critical to them. And waiting times, we were in in Glasgow. This is where the start of the project we worked with them. The waiting time was 12 months to get an echocardiogram.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, if you want an echo, it takes 12 months. And if it's critical to get the diagnosis very quickly, to get the right treatment, so that could stop the progression of the disease, it's very important. So we found new technologies. There's a new technology, it's called Opera. It's actually a handheld AI-guided device. So more physicians can start doing that. You don't have to go to this special
and maybe not
clinic.
Even a physician, maybe another healthcare professional.
Exactly right. So someone else who's authorized to do it. But you can actually make more people do that, and that would bring more access. And it actually is exactly what happened. So we could bring it from 12 months down to 6 weeks, which is, of course, amazing. But it also, the analysis was much quicker of the outcome of that echocardiogram in 25 minutes to 1 minute, because it's AI-driven. But also, when it comes to sustainability and the environment, the CO2 emission from patients went down by 8 kilo annually for those patients. So, I mean, it brings a lot of value for patients, for society, for the environment. So these initiatives, I think, are very good that we also work with. It's about policy, but it's also about bringing good initiatives that could show that it works.
These are the stories that need to be told. You mention AI and people, it's, the sky is falling. Everyone tells me about Terminator. In Terminator, Skynet is established to protect humanity, and it works out that the biggest threat to humanity is humanity, so humanity needs to be eradicated. Why aren't these stories being told? This is a marvellous feel-good story where the expertise of a company like AstraZeneca working, I know Glasgow well, and there's some super docs up there and lovely people. That's a great story.
It is being told. I mean, they recently made a publication around this because it's a really good initiative. It showed they can improve, health outcomes. In a medical journal.
A medical journal.
Yeah. So and it's great work being done. We're actually now bringing governments together to share experiences, and these stories like that are being shared. I think it's better the government speaks to governments. Of course, it's healthcare professionals, but also policymakers from governments that we try to bring together together so they can start sharing these examples and see can that be done in my country and so on.
Sure.
So it's been so. But I think going at scale is something that's very important. But it's also very hard sometimes.
Sure.
Not invented here. It doesn't work over here. We're different. But actually, when they start talking to each other and compare their countries, I think that we can foster that sharing and that can make we can scale up good initiatives across Europe.
Inertia isn't necessarily a bad thing. It stops you making reflexive moves.
Yeah.
And it leads to good consideration. So my penultimate question, and you set it up perfectly. How come folks in the medical, I write an article that goes into a medical journal that has a subscription of 5,000 people. So of 5,000 people, 500 read it, of 550 do something about it. How can we in the medical profession and we writing in the medical press do a better job promulgating new ideas, new science, such that it reaches the right audience and reaches them fast?
Yeah, well, I think it is it's a really good question. I think, there are very deep science. There are also other things like this opera project that needs to be shared, I think, as well to patients, because patients have a hard time to understand very deep science, but they can understand what these things can do and bring that actually out more to others and make it more digestible, easier to read. Maybe, there could be some bites out from that could be easy digestible in areas so we can spread that. Because I think for public, but also for policymakers, etc. Because I think they need to understand and know. Because academia is very important that we also document things, do it in the right way, the right methodology, so it's trusted evidence. And I think that in combination with more people understanding and reading it is the right way to go.
I concur, and I'm just going to give you the final word. Anything you want to say about, you've been with your company 28 years, I believe. That kind of loyalty is rare nowadays, and your curriculum vitae is astonishing, and you've achieved a huge amount in your career, and you've worked everywhere. So what final pithy takeaway would you have about why you're so loyal to AstraZeneca and why the projects that Astra are doing maybe that you're most excited about and where you see the future? You can say whatever you want, frankly.
Well, I'm super excited about the science. The science is going to lead us forward, absolutely. But it's not only science. We can't just focus on what we have as science that we want to bring to patients. We also need to focus on the healthcare systems. And we need to allow ourselves to do that, because otherwise there will not be any chance for medicines to come to patients if the healthcare systems aren't ready. And it's more critical now than ever, because we come with more advanced medicines and treatments to patients, and healthcare system needs to be prepared for that, and they're struggling already. So that's make me very excited, because this working and opening up to start also working with healthcare systems to improve healthcare systems in combination with bringing new medicines to market. That makes my job much more exciting. It has actually over the time gone from very much focus on what we have to sell to now focusing on how can we make sure our medicines are really coming to patients, and how can we set up the healthcare system and support the healthcare system, because without health we don't have anything. Everything starts with health and healthy population. That's what I'm asking also other pharma companies to focus more on supporting the healthcare system and to future-proof them. That's exciting. That brings me excited going to work every day. So.
Well, you like I say, you've clearly achieved a lot, and I'm sure there's a lot more to come. And I'm looking forward to getting to know you better, Stefan.
Right.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
without health, we really don't have anything. I think that was a really impactful statement from Stefan there, and he is completely right in my opinion. The pharmaceutical industry, no doubt, as we all know, plays a huge role in the world, and it has the power to completely change it for the better. So making sure that healthcare systems are the best equipped to implement these innovations that are coming out of the industry as they can only serve for the greater good. I think it's just getting that cohesion really in place and making sure everything merges together well.
Absolutely, that's right. And I really like the point he was making on how medication needs to get to patients wherever they are. We know the postcode health lottery is a massive issue. Even here in London, there can be life expectancy disparities of 10 years simply between boroughs. It's really surprising, and it's a disparity that urgently needs to be addressed. So yeah, it was great to see Stefan addressing that issue as well.
Absolutely, yes. But that is it for today's episode. Thank you so much again to Stefan for taking the time to talk with the team, and thank you for listening.
And thank you to Jonathan as well
Yes,
for stepping in as our guest host. We love to have him on, so maybe we will have to have him on again.
Absolutely, definitely.
Well, be sure to tune in next week when we'll be back with another interview with a heavy hitter from Pharma. But until then, it's goodbye from us.
Bye.